Danielle, I feel like there's some sort of kinship because you live in Arizona. I worked so much of my career in Arizona. So thanks so much for coming on and talking with me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And it's funny you say that because I was listening to some of your previous episodes this past week and kind of getting ready to come on and chat with you. And I just kept telling myself, I feel like we're kind of the same person. Like we would definitely get along because there were just so many similarities in what you were saying and in your story. And I
Oh,
just love it. So thank you for having me today.
are you from Arizona originally? Like, where did you grow up? Tell me about your childhood.
Sure. So I actually grew up in Southern California
Oh,
in
okay.
San Dimas. So I was
Oh,
born there. And whenever I say San Dimas, people usually either say, oh, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure or Raging Waters. Those are kind of the two that I get. So for any listeners in California who know that area, it was right next to Raging Waters, just to give them a little bit of context there. So I was born there, lived there until I was about 12, and my parents had divorced and remarried. And so that's actually what brought us out here to Arizona. My stepdad lived out here in Arizona. And so I went to high school in Scottsdale and lived here. And then when it was time to go away for college, I went to the Midwest. So about as different from the desert as you can
wow.
possibly get. But yeah, it was a great childhood, and like I said, when it came time to kind of fly the nest, I went about as 180 as you could possibly get by going to the snow and the winter. So I went to St. Mary's College in South Bend, Indiana. It's an all women's private Catholic school. It's actually the sister school of University of Notre Dame. And
Okay.
so it was great because we had small class sizes and I loved the academics there, but we had all of the social aspects of Notre Dame and a big university right across the street. So that was great. And I am still a diehard Notre Dame football fan to this day for that reason.
Did you study journalism? Like, did you always know you wanted to go into journalism?
So when I went to college, I honestly did not know what I wanted to do. I had always, like I said, I'd always loved to perform. I really loved to write. I like to take videos and edit things together, but I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I went in saying, well, I'll study communications. That seems pretty broad. And at one point, I thought that I wanted to go to law school potentially and take that track. And then I always joked that I looked at the LSAT and said, yeah, that's not me whatsoever. So while I was still in college, I was studying communication and English writing. I kind of created this double major for myself. And my mom actually recommended, hey, one summer while you're home from college, why don't you try interning at one of the local TV stations? I think you'd be really good at that. I think it would be really interesting. Just give it a shot. And so that's what I did in 2005. That summer, I interned at Fox 10 here in Phoenix. And it's kind of crazy because some of the reporters and anchors are still there from when I interned. And
Wow.
I just fell in love with it. And not just the TV aspect. I think a lot of people assume at first that maybe you go into broadcast journalism because you get to be on TV. And what I really loved was the fact that you went in every day with a blank slate. And by the end of the day, you had these stories that had been created. You had these rundowns that were put together. You had all these different shows that weren't there that morning and, the teamwork aspect of it. So I really fell in love with it. And my school didn't really have a journalism program because we were so small. And so I decided to go to graduate school and I went to Northwestern University to the Medill School of Journalism and I got my master's. And that for me was really instrumental because it provided that hands on practical training that a lot of students can get in their undergrads or, if they go to a J school. And yeah, so I did that and went off into my first markets from there.
What a great school for journalism.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I was in the Midwest, just down the road in Indiana, and I had applied to several schools. And I remember just saying, okay, if I get into Northwestern, I'm going to go. It's meant
Yeah.
to be. I will figure it out, and I'm going to go. And so I did. And I think what was so valuable about that experience is, this is back in 2006, 2007, not to date myself too much, but I think what was so great about it is even back then they were instilling in us, look, you are going to have to know how to do everything. You're going to have to know how to shoot, how to write, how to edit, and you're going to have to do all of that probably on a daily deadline for at least the first several years of your career. And so I feel like it really prepared me for that going into my first market where I did MMJ and you did have to work on that daily deadline. And so it was only a year and 3 months. It was an extra 3 months because I did an internship at the CBS station out there with one of their investigative reporters. But I really think it gave me the practical training I needed to go into my first market confident and able to do the job on day one.
Can you run down for me some of your markets that you went to over time? You became a main anchor at one point, correct?
Yes. So my first job out of graduate school, I had applied to dozens and dozens of stations. I think on your Ginger Z episode, she talked about sending out those VHS tapes, which I did and had a full spreadsheet of who got back to me and who didn't. And so when I left grad school, I actually had a couple of job offers. One was for a tiny market, Grand Junction, Colorado, and another one was to be the Killeen, Texas bureau reporter for a station in Austin. And so I almost took the Killeen, Texas job. The Grand Junction job, I think, was going to pay me like 16.5 for my first year, and I didn't know how to live off of that at the time. And so I almost went to Texas, but then just something in me just kind of felt like, you know what, let me just take a few minutes and really think about this decision. And it just didn't quite feel right. And so I ended up going back home to Arizona after I graduated for a few months. And I was sending out applications online here and there. And I sent one on a whim to the NBC station, KSBY TV in San Luis Obispo, California, in the Central Coast. And the news director got back to me within 15 minutes of emailing my stuff over. Within 3 hours, I was booked to go out for an interview in a few days. And then within 2 weeks, I had a job offer and was moving to San Luis Obispo.
Wow.
And so I really believe that just came together for a reason because it was supposed to. So I started my career there. And I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was to start in a market like that. I mean, beautiful to begin with, beaches and just beautiful weather, wonderful people, wonderful communities. And it's right between Los Angeles and San Francisco. So we would cover big news stories.
Yeah.
And so I was there for about 3.5 years. I started as a bureau reporter, about 30 minutes away from the main station, and worked my way up to eventually being the weekend anchor and weekend executive producer and, all the titles that you hold in a smaller market. And at one point, my GM, I always joke he tried to trade me to our Corpus Christi station. But I know he had, his heart was in the right place. But one day I got a random message from the news director at our Corpus Christi station who said, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. We're excited that you're considering our main anchor position." And I thought, I have no idea what you're talking about. Who are you again? And so at one point, we were exploring me potentially going to our Corpus Christi station as a main anchor. And again, something just kind of didn't feel right about that opportunity. And so I thanked my GM for thinking of me. But I said, the only other station I want to go to in our company would be in Tucson at KVOA. And I really want to go there as a morning anchor because that'll get me closer to home. And I remember him saying, well, they just filled their position. So that's a really small chance that that's actually going to happen. And then fast forward a couple of years, sure enough, in the break room, there was a posting for the morning anchor spot at KVOA. And it was kind of the same thing where I stayed at the station till like 3 a.m. putting together a reel and sent in my stuff. And sure enough, I wound up as the morning anchor at KVOA in Tucson. And I was there for 3 years and then moved up to Phoenix, where I started as the weekend anchor at the ABC station, ABC 15, and eventually moved into the morning anchor role there.
It shows like you stuck with your gut and how important your gut is telling you, man, this I just know in my heart doesn't feel right. And sometimes it's, it is important to know that, hey, like this is what I'm going to do next. Like I'm just going to hold out. I'm going to hope for the best. Like, because, like sometimes it's easy not to listen to our gut,
Yes, 1,000%. And I'm glad that you've honed in on that because I think that's been one of the biggest life lessons I've learned as I've transitioned out of local news as well, is it's not always easy, but that listening to your gut and your intuition is really so important.
And you said that you went to Phoenix as the weekend anchor at the ABC station. How long were you there for, and what happened next?
So I was the weekend anchor. Gosh, I got there 2014 in September of 2014. By that fall, I was filling in on the morning show because that anchor had left. So I was just filling in. And then I became the permanent co-anchor in the morning a few months after that. So it happened really quickly. And again, the morning anchor position in my home market was my dream. That is what
Yeah.
I wanted for so long. And so it was a dream come true. We had an amazing anchor team. It was so fun getting texts and calls from family or from people I went to high school with or, billboards. And I mean, it was great. And then about 3.5 years into my stint as the morning anchor, I had just signed a new contract and kind of out of the blue, I was told that they were going to put me back on the weekends and bring someone else in for mornings, just with the hopes that since that person was kind of more tenured and had been in the market years before, that they would see some sort of a rating spike with that. And that was really hard. I mean, that was probably one of the hardest, kind of most devastating moments, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. It kind of felt like everything that I had worked so hard for and just my dream kind of crumbled, right in front of me. And
Well,
so,
we put so much of our self worth on our job. We put so much of our
yes,
identity on our job. So when somebody says we're just going to go in a different direction, it just feels so personal.
yes, incredibly personal, incredibly personal. And, my husband and I, our oldest daughter was, I think, just over a year at the time. And so we were kind of thrown into this. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if I'm going to have a job anymore. I mean, there was so much going on. And so I wound up actually staying in that weekend anchor spot. And I was at the station for about 3 more years. And in that time, COVID happened. And once I went back to weekends, became the education reporter. So going into COVID, I had been reporting on education for months. And that was instrumental in me being able to lead the station's education coverage through COVID. And so I really feel like even though personally it was really tough and I did my best to hold my head up and still be a team player, I really do feel like some of my best work happened in that time
Mm.
because I was really honing those reporting skills and sourcing skills. And I didn't know it yet, but I was making relationships that were going to carry me into life after local news, which I can see now. Hindsight's 2020, but at the
Yeah.
time, it's tough.
So when did you actually make the decision that you were going to break out of breaking news?
Yes. So I always say this is a choice that I probably spent about 2 years sitting on. I
Yeah.
think we can all relate when you've been in the business and it is so much of your life. When you first start hearing those whispers in your head of, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I think I want to do something different. It can be really scary. And you're kind of like, nope, I don't actually think that.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was probably a good couple years before I actually made the jump. And it was after I had had our third daughter, Charlotte. Um, I was working nights, weekends. My husband and I were kind of tag team parenting. We were coming off of COVID, and I was really burnt out from reporting and just working, essentially 24/7. And so my contract was coming up and I had an offer to stay. And I just kept telling my husband and myself, I just really feel like I'm supposed to make the jump. Like, I don't know what's next. I don't know where it's going to go, but I just feel like I can't keep putting this much time and energy into something that I'm no longer as passionate about.
How
And
scary was that to make that ultimate decision? Because one, you're stepping into the unknown, you're stepping into a new field. You're saying, I'm not going to be the face of the city that I grew up in anymore. How did that feel?
it was scary. I felt like I was silly for giving something up that so many other people would just give anything to have. Even the financial part of it. I mean, going down from a two pretty substantial income family to at least a one income family for a little bit of time was scary. I definitely had moments where I cried thinking that, when the girls had career day at school, that they wouldn't be able to say that their mom was a morning news anchor. And that was all me. I mean, even now when they see me on TV occasionally, they really could care less. But, but it was just me and all those
Right.
feelings of this is who I am. This is what I've worked my entire professional career for. What am I doing? But we just made the leap and we went into it. We had built up enough financially to where I could be home for about 6 months and we wouldn't have to pay to put all three in daycare. Honestly, that was a big point too, was
Yeah.
we have three girls under five. We need daycare if I'm going to keep working, and that's going to be more than our mortgage. So
Yep.
we need to reevaluate. So the original plan was I'm going to stay home for 6 months. We'll get one of them in kindergarten. Then we'll only have to pay for two. And then I'll figure out if I'm going to go back to work full time or what I'm going to do. And just in those 6 months, some opportunities presented themselves. And here I am. I'm still in kind of freelancing and, started my own media services business. And so I'm still kind of figuring it out sometimes, but we're growing and doing great. And it's allowed me to be really present for the girls, which is something that I honestly didn't know that I would want so much.
What have you learned in making that switch from journalism and news to PR?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot, actually. I think one of the interesting things is, being on the other side of PR when you're working in news and you're receiving pitches, you understand it to a degree. But now that I'm on the other side of that and working with clients, one of the services that my business offers is PR support. I didn't realize how much time, effort, and energy goes into these pitches and finding opportunities and sometimes being relentless if you have to be to work for your client. And so that's given me a whole new appreciation for the world of PR and earned media. I think also it's been wonderful to see how those skills that we use in news translate to other areas. And not just that, oh, I know who works in a newsroom and who we should contact, but storytelling and understanding what makes a story and what doesn't. And being able to tell a client, look, this story doesn't have enough to be a TV story. This is more of a print story because there's not video, or we need more elements if we're going to pitch this to a reporter. And having that understanding, I think, is incredibly helpful. And also just, teaching people how to be comfortable on camera. Part of what we do also is we do media trainings with executives and nonprofits and teaching them how to approach an interview and how to do an interview, whether it's in person or on a podcast. But it's been really wonderful to see that the skills translate.
Yeah, you make a good point. So when somebody is wanting to make that jump from news to PR or something else that's similar in the communications field,
Sure.
when they're filling out their resume or reconfiguring their resume, what are some of the skills that first do translate from news to PR that you suggest that they highlight or put on their resume?
I actually didn't apply for any PR jobs once I left. Um, the first PR support job that I've had was with a woman who runs an agency here in town, and her husband worked with my husband, and she would bring clients into the station all the time. And she said, "Hey, I could use some help about 20 hours a month. Do you want to help me?" And I said, "Sure." So that was kind of how it started. Um,
Hmm.
as far as, if you are filling out applications and things, I think really highlighting the storytelling aspect that what elements make a good story. Also, obviously your network of connections is huge. Being able to text someone at a station and say, "Hey, I have this story. Are you interested?" instead of emailing the news desk is huge. Um, and also just, as reporters and anchors, we're constantly aware of what's happening around the country as well, national headlines, what's going on in the news. So being able to translate complicated issues or complicated topics to a local level, I think is really important as well.
How has the work-life balance aspect changed for you? Do you still feel like you get to be creative? Because I know a lot of people that are trying to make that jump are really afraid that one, they're just going to be stuck in this grind and not feel creatively fulfilled, if that makes sense.
Sure. And again, I've never worked in an agency setting or anything like that, so it may be different. The work-life balance for me personally, it, it's actually a little more difficult because since I do work from home for the most part when I'm not shooting Arizona Living, since I do run my own business, essentially everything is intertwined. So I'm sometimes in the school pickup line, but I'm emailing back a client about a story that ran this morning, or I'm
Yeah.
up at night after they've gone to bed researching things. And so that's been a little tougher for me to try to navigate of how do I make that separation of when I'm home with my family versus, no, I've got so much work to do. I have to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's been tough. As far as creativity, I've always loved to write. So writing articles, writing op-eds, writing pitches, it does fulfill me to an extent, but I do miss the piecing stories together and the video and the shooting and the editing aspect. And so I kind of find that in other outlets. For instance, I've been working on growing my social media platforms and kind of dabbling in influencer marketing a bit with some of the big family Instagrammers out here. And so that kind of fulfills the creative itch for me. We also do a little bit of content creation and production work through the business where I can go out and shoot interviews and edit things together still. But I do miss that part.
Do you miss what we call the grind? Do you miss the very deadline driven atmosphere?
It's an interesting question because I don't miss the stress associated with the deadline driven atmosphere. But there were times where it was nice where you would say, okay, I did my story for the 5. I did everything. I'm going home. So until tomorrow, I can breathe a little bit and we'll start again tomorrow. Whereas I feel like now, yes, my deadlines are flexible, but I'm thinking about it all the time, which is a little tougher sometimes.
Yeah, because now you're in somewhat of a 24/7 business. Your job doesn't really stop. So it's trying to find, and I've talked about this with other podcasters. It's like trying to figure out that when I'm home, I'm home. Yes. When I'm with the kids, I'm with the kids. When I'm at work, I'm at work. But that can be those lines can be so blurred when you're in a job like PR or real estate or something that takes you into more of a, I don't want to say freelance type role, but kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I really had to learn because February was 3 years since I made the leap and it's been 2 years since we officially made me a business. And I've really had to learn boundaries. I've had to learn how to carve out some time for myself. I mean, like today, for instance, is one of 3 days a week that all 3 of my girls are either at school or in their learning program. And it's tempting to want to do all the things when they're out of the house. Like, okay, I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to go grocery shopping. Yeah. I'm going to do all this. And I've really had to learn to say, it's okay if my morning is clear. I can sit, like this morning, I sat and made myself breakfast and I drank some coffee and I watched some trashy reality TV show for 30 minutes.
Amazing.
And that was yes. But I have to force myself to do that because otherwise I will just be go, go, go until I close my eyes at night. So that's been a really big learning curve for me of taking care of myself so that I can help take care of my family and also take care of the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, that resonates for sure.
I was going to say, I think we can all kind of agree that that's one of the hardest things to do, whether you're working inside the home, outside the home. Yeah.
Yeah. For those that are scared to make that jump from news to whatever position that is outside news, what would you say to them?
I get so many calls and emails from former colleagues, friends of friends who are kind of on the cusp of making this decision. And I feel like it's a very similar conversation each time because I remember having it when I was thinking about it. You mentioned it's such a part of your identity and it feels like if you let it go, some people feel like they'll never get it back or they feel like, that whole part of them goes away and what's
it feels
left.
like grief, honestly.
Yes. Yeah. Or it feels like you've peaked and it's just kind of all downhill from here. And so I just always try to say, there's a reason you're feeling this way, first of all. The fact that it's even a thought and that you are thinking about it enough to call me and ask me questions means it's getting there. And I always say you won't regret making the jump because chances are, if you really miss it that much, that you could probably find your way back in at some point. It may look different.
Yes.
It may be a different position, maybe a different place, different, but you can probably find your way back. But if you never try it, that I think is what is worse, because then there's always that what if factor. What if I would have tried it, or what if I would have jumped? And I think that can just create resentment in your current job. So I just try to assure people that skills translate, that the fact that you're thinking that means you should really listen to your gut, and also to try to be proactive. So it's something that I did when I was still working at ABC 15. They don't necessarily know this, but that's okay. Is, those last 6 months or so when I was really starting to think, I think I'm going to want to jump, I didn't have any sort of PR clips or anything to share. And so there are those freelancing websites, Upwork and Fiverr, that are out there. I don't know if you've ever gone on those, but I would go on Fiverr and Upwork and I would write press releases for $20 to $30 a press release. And it was really just to get the clips, so that if I wanted to go into like an agency position, I would have things to show to say, look, I can write press releases.
Yeah.
And so I did that for probably 5 or 6 months before I actually made the jump, just so that when I made the jump, I had a few press releases in hand, some pitches. I had, I think, a couple earned media placements, but I would only do it for clients who were out of state, because I was too nervous that someone here in Arizona would be
Yeah.
like, aren't you on the news, and why are you writing press releases for $30 a piece? But that was really big because I
That's so
feel like it
smart.
gave me something, moving forward.
Yeah. And speaking of the jump, there are two camps that usually exist. There's those that go into PR and a couple years later they want back in news. And I've heard time and time again, women that are in news, they leave and they come back. It is possible, guys. If you want to go back into news, your career is not over. You can use old reel footage. It doesn't matter. As long as you're connecting with the news directors, connecting with the right people, you can get back into news. It is certainly possible. The second camp I've heard are the people that go from news into PR, and a year down the road, you ask, how is it? And they're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I got out. I am so happy I made that jump. Wow, I wish I had done it sooner.
Yeah, and I know people who even still work at, ABC 15, for example, who left and went to work as kind of PIO positions at different county organizations, or jumped out and they didn't like it and they came back, and, or they went to a school district, didn't like it, came back. And so it definitely is possible. I always do caution a little bit, because I've had other women approach me and say, oh gosh, I would love to have the schedule that you have where I can be with my kids but also work. And I make sure to remind them that in order to do that, my husband works full time and has benefits. And so we're very fortunate that we can rely on that. And so, I don't make what I made when I was working in news. And that has been an adjustment. And I mean, I can't even really say sacrifice, because we've been able to make it work. But just being mindful that, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to find a position that's going to pay what you made in news, or, kind of give you the same lifestyle per se. And so I always warn about that, because I think it is important, if you're going to make the jump, that you go in with managed expectations as well.
Yeah, I always talk about the work-life balance and whether or not you can have sufficient work-life balance. And my answer to that is yes, but you have to get used to the trade-offs. There are always going to be trade-offs, and no matter what you do. If you're sticking into news, you're going to have trade-offs. If you go and do more of the freelance lifestyle, get out of news, there's going to be trade-offs. Like, there are always these trade-offs, and sometimes the grass is greener than you think, so you have to put that into perspective too.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it really comes down to, does what you're doing light you up? And I know that that can be a little cliche, but when I was working the morning show, and my husband, who was a sports producer for a long time, he would be gone for days at a time with the local pro sports teams. I had our daughter, who was a year and a half to two at the time. We had nannies coming in and out overnight because I was going to work at 3 a.m. I mean, it was wild what we were doing, but we both were so passionate about what we were doing that that's just what you did. We just
Hmm.
made those sacrifices, we made it work. And then when it got to a point where what I was doing wasn't lighting me up that way anymore, but we were still making a lot of those sacrifices, I think that's where it called into question, okay, do we need to make a shift here? And
Yeah.
honestly, COVID and being home more often, I think was a huge eye opener for my husband and I, because that was by far the most amount of time that we had really spent together.
Yeah.
And we kind of started to think like, wow, like if we had quote unquote regular 9 to 5 jobs, like we could eat dinner together at night and we could watch Netflix at night. And it was like this foreign concept to us. And so I think that contributed a little bit to it too, was once we kind of got a glimpse of what a more normal schedule could be, it made it more appealing.
Something I would also tell our listeners is find the team that you like working with. Because whether you're in news, whether you're not in news, you can, this is my personal perspective. You can deal with a position far longer if you like the people you're working with. Do you like the news director you're with? Do you like your coworkers? Do you like the staff? Are they supportive of you? My word, if you have a team, and I have a team that I absolutely love, that is so fantastic, and I still work in news, and that's what's kept me there for so long, is because I have such a supportive team. So I do urge our listeners, whether you make the jump or not, find that job where you like the people you're working with, because if you don't like the people you're surrounded with, I think the job lasts a whole lot less long. You know what I mean?
Yes, 1,000%. And I think part of that was what made my move from mornings to weekends back in the day so difficult, because our morning team was so close.
Yeah.
I still talk with them. I actually just saw one of them and her daughter and little boy the other day. And so we were so close, but it's also a completely different team now. And so even these days, when I think back to that and think, oh, I missed that. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. So, I don't necessarily want to go back for something that isn't there. But you're right. Even when I was back on the weekends, it was a tough situation, but I was surrounded by friends. I had some coworkers who were wonderful, and we had a blast on the weekends. I had a wonderful production crew, and that's probably what helped me hang in there for about 3 more years.
Yeah. Speaking of your personal life, you've been open about having postpartum depression. Can you tell our listeners about that experience for you?
Sure. Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up. I always like to be transparent about that whenever possible. It's really become a passion of mine and my family's. The short version is, after our second daughter, Harper, was born in 2019, a couple weeks after she was born, I was really struggling emotionally, crying and very anxious. Now, in hindsight, I had had these same symptoms after my first was born, but I thought this was just, oh, this is being a mom. I've never been a mom before. I'm guessing you just feel like you're in this fight or flight mode all day, every
Right.
day, and
Yeah.
that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just white knuckled it, honestly, for about 2.5 years until our second was born. And I had gone to my doctor, who's amazing. They had given me some supplements to try to help with some of that. And it did help for a few weeks. And I almost kind of swung the other way, where all of a sudden I was like almost euphoric of, oh my gosh, I can run a marathon and I'm going to have 15 more babies and life is amazing. And I knew that that wasn't my baseline, but I thought, hey, this is way better than being super anxious and super sad and everything that I'd been experiencing before. And then at about 6 weeks postpartum, I always say the wheels just fell off, where I had just a huge crash, and And it wasn't the crying and the being sad, which is how I thought postpartum depression and anything like that presented. It was the anxiety. And I know you've
Mm,
been open about your panic attacks that you were having,
yeah.
and I had never had panic attacks before this. And it got to the point where I was having multiple panic attacks a day and just felt like I could not function. I mean, even just changing a diaper started to feel really overwhelming. Or, I would sit in clothes that had been spit up on for hours because I didn't feel like I could run upstairs to change. And um, it was getting to a point where I was starting to think about wanting to run away from my family and really starting to believe that they would be better off without me. And so my husband, one day, my sister-in-law and I had a friend who were watching this happen. And unbeknownst to me, they were chatting and saying, something is off here. And they had talked to my husband about it too, which I didn't know, and kind of flagged him of, hey, we're concerned about Danielle. And so one day he just asked me point blank in the kitchen, do you think that you would ever hurt the girls? And I remember being so angry that he had asked me that question, but I was angry because I knew why he was asking it and I knew how dire things were getting. And so my response was, of course, I would never hurt the girls. If anything, I would hurt myself first. And he kind of looked at me as, well, we definitely don't want that either. And so that I think was really a turning point where we knew that we needed professional help. And so thankfully, through friends of friends, I was able to be connected with a wonderful organization here who specializes in the perinatal mood disorders like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and through medication and therapy, I was able to get back on my feet. And, we're in a much, much better place now than we were before, thankfully.
Since opening up about it, I am sure you've received the messages and learned that you are not alone, because people keep that inside for so long. And I'm just telling you, thank you for being so open about it, because, oh, there are so many women that are battling this and don't even know that they're battling this. They think, what's wrong with me? Am I just being anxious? Am I just overthinking everything? And like, no, like there can be a problem that is really existing.
Yes, absolutely. And that was why my husband and I, shortly after I'd gone back to work, we decided that we would sit down and share our story publicly. And so, as part of that, I did a three-part series on maternal mental health, which included my story and also profiling other women who'd gone through it and work being done in Arizona to help support maternal mental health. And I remember being so scared to tell my managers that I had even gone through this because in my mind, I thought, oh my gosh, nobody's going to trust me on the desk. They're going to know that I'm on medication and they're not going to want to hear the news from me. They're not going to trust me. And it was basically all of the stigma that I was hoping to break in sharing our story that I
Yeah.
felt. And thankfully, I was really truly blessed because they not only gave me the green light, but they really embraced it and embraced me. And um, they were almost a little too protective of me when we were getting ready to show our story because I included in there that bit about my husband asking if I would ever hurt the girls. And I remember my news director saying, I'm just really worried if you put that in there, people can be cruel. I don't want anybody to come after you or to say things and so they wanted me to keep that part out. And I just said, I think we have to keep it in there because those are things that people don't vocalize. They don't share those things.
Yes.
And to this day, that is a series and a story and a part of my life that I still have people who come up to us at church or in the donut shop and who say, I remember when you did that story. Thank you so much for sharing. Or my husband and I have had couples reach out to us. And sometimes it's the husband saying, I remember you did a story on this. I don't know what's going on. Where do I go for help? And he's very vocal about it too with men because he's very open that when I was going through it at first, he had no idea what was going on. He thought
Yeah.
like, what, like, you're on maternity leave. I'm working full time. Why am I getting up with the baby constantly? Why are you running away? Like, what's going on? And it wasn't until I started having physical symptoms like panic attacks that he really realized, oh my gosh, this is a thing and it's happening. Um,
Well, and to have a husband that was supportive of you, that would ask you these questions, that was concerned about you, that is key. That is so important because some women just don't have that support.
1,000%. And I think part of that is why I knew deep down once I was in a better space mentally that I wanted to somehow be involved in advocacy, whether it's just sharing my story. I've had the pleasure of working with some wonderful organizations here in Arizona who specialize in this type of work because it broke my heart to think about families or single parents or people who are navigating this and don't know what's going on and don't realize that there are resources out there, there is support out there. And so anything that we can do to educate or to raise awareness, ideally before baby comes, because you know how it is. Once you have a baby, everything's just all up in the air
Yeah.
and it's really hard to decipher what's going on. Um, and for us, even if I had people who don't have kids and don't plan to have kids, but who came up to me and said, you know what, this has really showed me how to be a better friend to my friends who are having babies, or to my, siblings who are having families, or to my daughter or my granddaughter, and just kind of that reminder of the importance of the village and the community and keeping an eye on each other and being supports for other people.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. How can you support someone that is going through postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety? Like, how do you show up as a friend for that person?
Sure. So I always preface when I talk about this of, I'm not a medical professional, but I can speak anecdotally of, as a friend who has supported other women and who's been through it myself, and really not just other women, but other families, because this really is something that impacts the entire family. For me, I always make a note to, just check in my case, it's been with the mom. So I'll check in with mom, once every week or so, and not just hey, how's it going? Because 9 out of 10 times they'll say fine or tired, but really point blank asking, how are you feeling mentally and physically? And gauging their response. And, if they do have things they're struggling with, of validating that struggle of, yes, this is hard. You are doing something really hard and you're not alone in this, and just reminding them of the community that they do have. Our family likes to bring meals to other families after they've had a baby. And so I'm teaching my girls kind of that act of service. So, you go to their house and we bring them food. And if there's other siblings, the girls will play with the siblings for a bit and just finding ways to be present and kind of provide some respite when possible.
When you were going through your postpartum depression journey and after that, first, how much shame did you feel going through this? And for those that did go through this and do feel shame around going through postpartum depression, what would you say to them?
I felt so much shame. And I have these vivid memories, even still, and it's been about 6 years since we went through the real tough stuff. I have this vivid memory of my husband holding our newborn over his shoulder, trying to make my older one breakfast while I was cowered in the corner in the dining room, having a panic attack and just kind of rocking back and forth, trying to get myself to calm down. I mean, just paralyzed. And I remember seeing him running around and doing all this and just feeling so ashamed that I could not handle it. I mean, really just feeling like I wasn't strong enough, what was wrong with me that I couldn't do this when so many other moms are out there doing it with more kids than I have. Why am I having such a hard time? That was so hard. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of people don't vocalize these feelings because you feel like there's the standard that you're supposed to be able to meet. And if you're doing anything short of that, you automatically think there's something wrong with you. And so I felt so much shame. And honestly, it was therapy that really helped me release some of that shame and put more realistic expectations on myself.
Yeah. And also, for those that, you know, felt the shame, like, what kind of advice would you give them? Because I know that like people come out of it and then they still carry, especially like some of our older generations where this wasn't talked about, what would you say to those people that still carry around that shame that they went through something like that?
Yeah. Well, I was actually listening to your podcast episode with Dr. Elizabeth, was it Lombardo, her last
Yes.
name?
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of shoulding all over yourself. And
Yeah.
that really resonated with me because so much of that shame is feeling like you should have done a better job. You should have done XYZ. And so for
Yeah.
anyone who feels that way, I mean, there's times I still struggle with that. I think we all struggle with that to an
Yeah.
extent. But I think you have to take a step back and ask yourself, well, who says that you should have been doing that? Who is telling you that that was the standard that you were supposed to meet or that these are the things that are supposed to be happening? And if it's you putting that on yourself, trying to do a deeper dive of where is that coming from? Why are
Yeah.
you feeling that way?
Yeah.
And being able to be at peace with realizing, because I feel like most of us do this, that you are doing the best that you can with the skill set you have and the information you have at the time. And it doesn't do much to beat yourself up over things that have already come and gone and things that at the time you just had no way of knowing otherwise.
And girl, you have 3 children. I mean, how do you
Yes,
do it? How
yes,
do you do it?
three girls that I had. Yeah, so now they're 8, 6, and almost 4. Charlotte will be 4. Right now we're in August, so she'll be 4 in October, depending when people listen to this. And it can be a lot, for sure. It can be a lot, but you know what? I still rely on some of those skills that I learned and honed in therapy, in just learning how to regulate my emotions, because you can't regulate someone else's emotions if you can't regulate yours first.
Yeah.
And really trying to just keep things in perspective and being in the moment with them as much as I can. And I always joke with my 2 best friends from college. We're on a text thread and we text literally every day, multiple times a day. And they each have a little girl. And they always say, I don't know how you do this with 3 because 1 is so hard.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, for me, one felt really hard. It all just depends on where you're at in life. And you can't compare your experience to someone else's because it's totally different. And then I also say, well, I'm just broken in so much that stuff just doesn't bother me anymore.
So
Like
true.
it almost took me 3 kids to get to the point where there's some things I just let go because I literally don't have the capacity to care.
Yeah, it's just chaotic now, and
So,
you're like,
yeah,
you're
it's just how
flowing
it
through
is.
the chaos.
Yes. Well, and knowing like, okay, some of these things will pass. Some of this is the stage. Some of this is the phase. It's like you've been able to see the other side for some of it. And so just your perspective, I think, changes to where you just don't get as worked up about stuff as you used to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so open and honest about that. I really appreciate it. But before I let you go, I do want to talk about your business. Can you tell me about what you do and how maybe other people can get involved?
Yeah, sure. So I launched, it's Take 45 Media. It's a media services business, and we officially launched as an S Corp a couple of years ago now. And I basically created it as an umbrella for the many media services that I found myself doing on a freelance basis. So, for instance, on air hosting, I co host Arizona Living for Cox's Yearview platform. So it airs for all Cox subscribers out here in Arizona and then also online streaming at watch.yearview.com. And so that's been really fun. So I offer on-air hosting, I do some voiceover work, and then I also offer that PR support component where different organizations or even different people, like the woman that I've been working with for a few years now, all come in and help them with their PR strategies. And so sometimes I still feel like I have that imposter syndrome a little bit of,
Mm.
oh yeah, I run my own business, but it still
Yeah.
feels weird saying that. I don't know why. But it's been fun to kind of make it a catch-all for all of these things that I've been doing. It's just now I can offer them as services to other people, which has been fun. And so if anybody out there, I'm still working on a website that is on my to-do list, but my Instagram at Danielle Lerner TV is a great way to see what's going on with Arizona Living, to see what's going on with some of my, content creation and influencer partnerships and all of that aspect of the business.
For someone that maybe wants to leave news and start a business like you do, where they focus on storytelling and they focus on media companies and creating maybe videos and packages or whatever for those companies, what advice would you give in that respect of making that jump?
So I think that's something where you need to lay some groundwork first. I know for me, had I gone straight from news to a full-time PR position, I think I may have been a little bit lost just because I have learned so much in these last 3 years from working with a seasoned PR pro.
Hmm.
And so, I've had some friends who made the jump who went to a small PR firm or kind of started smaller, obviously took a bit of a pay cut, but to get that ground experience before being able to jump to a bigger company. And so I think kind of like in news, we start in smaller markets to hone those skills, learn about it, and then move up. I think it's important to approach making a career change like that in that way. So again, maybe managing those expectations of, maybe the goal is to work for a large hospital system one day, but we're going to start at this smaller PR firm doing some of that groundwork to really get to know the business a little better.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good advice because it can be easy to leave news and then want to go to something super flashy or super
Yeah.
glamorous because you were just in something kind of super flashy and super glamorous being in news. I can see how people would just want to make that jump, but also you're now not just competing with news people, you're competing with PR people that are already doing PR. And that is a tough pill to swallow because if you're trying to get a PR job from news and you're like, man, all these people aren't calling me back, I'm not getting responses, just know you're also competing with the people that already have PR experience. So, yeah, like you said, starting at the small little clinic versus the big hospital system may be the way you have to go to get your foot in the door and then
Right.
continue to grow and snowball that.
Right. And that's where I think those relationships are so important and tapping into the network that you've built and getting in front of people. Because even if on paper it might be hard for them to see how the skills correlate, if you can talk to them and meet them and tell them yourself, I think that has a huge impact.
Yeah, and also shout out to, I think it's the news group, Facebook group called News to PR. So shout out to
Yes.
them. Go on that, get those resources. There's tons of connections you can make. People posting job postings all the time. So just look for your resources, look for your connections and people that have left news and are working in the PR business. We're all, most of us are all here to help. We're not gatekeeping.
Yeah. Well, and I'll actually say that's how I got Arizona Living was because one of the women who initially worked with my husband in sports and then was also in news, and she's now an influencer and doing wonderful things. She was initially approached to do kind of a one-off shoot for them, and she couldn't because she was under contract somewhere else. And so she said, well, actually, I can't, but I know this girl who is around and looking for work. Do you want me to connect you with her? And so what turned into one shoot turned into two shoots and then turned into co-hosting Arizona Living going on 3 years now. And so again, those connections and referrals and things really do make a difference.
Before I let you go, can we run through the quick fires really quick?
Yes, let's do it real quick.
Let's make them quick fires.
Yes, yes.
If I weren't a journalist, I would be blank.
If I weren't a journalist, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. So maybe I would try that.
Really? Love animals.
Yes, love animals. Yes.
Your coffee order.
Depends on the day and if it's hot or cold outside. If it is hot outside, it would be probably a caramel macchiato of some
Ooh.
sort, stirred because I don't necessarily love it separated. If it is really warm outside, like it is most of the time here in Arizona, I would go for like an iced vanilla latte.
Perfect. Your favorite travel destination?
I have big dreams of traveling to the Greek islands and some other exotic places. But right now, as a family, our favorite spot is Carlsbad, California. We go,
Oh,
yes, we go every year in the summer for a week and we rent a little house. And it's just been so fun
oh,
for us and for the girls. And we even brought our dog this year, which was super fun. So that's just
yeah.
kind of our dream spot right now.
I always love the annual vacations too, because the kids start to learn, like, oh, this is our annual thing. I love it.
Yes. Yes. It's been really fun to see them A, travel better to where it's now getting really fun. And B, every year, oh, when are we going to Carlsbad and getting all
Yeah.
excited about it.
Your favorite restaurant?
Gosh, this is a tough one. I love Mexican food. That is one of my favorites. So really any type of like really good Mexican restaurant is gonna get two thumbs up from me.
Is there a good one in Phoenix? I'm impartial
There,
to Tucson.
Yes, there are lots of good ones in Phoenix, lots of good ones in Tucson. We actually just discovered one around the corner from our house. We had friends in town visiting, and it's called Rio Rico Grill, and it's a mom and pop owned spot. And it was some of the best food I had. The service was incredible, so I keep wanting to go back like ASAP.
Something people often get wrong about you.
I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but when I was thinking about this question, I feel like people, once they get to know me, a lot of times say, wow, but like you're so nice and you're so funny and you're so sweet. And so I don't know if I have like a resting face that isn't super inviting, but I feel like I get that a lot where people are pleasantly surprised that I'm really nice and friendly and I don't know,
Oh,
a nice person, I guess.
I knew you were friendly from the get go.
Yeah.
That's not true. But I get it. Like so many people on this podcast
Yeah.
have said that though. So you're not the
Oh,
only
have
one.
they? Okay, good. I thought I was gonna come across like really rude. Yeah.
The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
I've been trying to make an effort to read more. I've really been trying to do that. And so I've been really into Kristen Hanna books lately. And so she has The Nightingale, which is incredible. And then she also did one called The Women, which I read recently, which I mean, they're emotional roller coaster rides. So if you're looking for something lighthearted, probably not best to pick up one of those. But her writing is just incredible. And it's like historical fiction based on, one of them's about the Vietnam War, one of them's about World War II, and just phenomenal,
I
phenomenal book.
feel like her name has come up on the podcast too for other
Yeah.
books.
Yeah. She's really having a big moment right now, which is so warranted.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
So my instinct is to say Kelly Clarkson because I love Kelly Clarkson. She is just my I would fangirl over her big time. But then
Oh,
I was like, well, do I want to just hang out with her or do I want to be her? And I think I just want to hang out with her. So I think I would actually choose I was really interested in space when I was younger and I'm still really fascinated with space. And so I think hanging out with an astronaut or being an astronaut for a day would be really cool.
that's a good answer. I love it. One thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
I am deeply grateful for my mental health right now, especially with a bigger family and juggling all the things. I know that had I not put in the work and done that work to really learn all these coping skills and kind of get to know myself a little more in that way, that I would not be where I am right now. So I'm incredibly grateful for my mental health and for my family.
If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, girl, how much time do we have for this one? I feel like I could write a book for my former self. Two things. One, I would say it's okay to have a dream, but don't get tunnel vision. I think for so long I was so focused on I'm going to be a morning anchor in my home market, and that was it. And so when that wasn't in the cards for me anymore, I felt incredibly lost and just, what's going to happen? What am I going to do now? And so I think it's okay to have that dream and work toward that dream, but also be open to other possibilities, especially as you get older and your life changes. So I would say that.
Mm.
Number two is I would tell myself to be more confident in who she is and what she brings to the table. And I say that because looking back at pictures of my much younger self, um, I just I see someone who really wanted to people please constantly, especially in our business, in our industry, and trying to fit this mold of other people's standards. And I think sometimes that made me feel like I wasn't enough. And so I think I would try to empower my younger self to get to know herself a little more and to be comfortable and confident in her skin.
Well, Danielle, we covered so many different avenues and
I
topics,
know.
but I feel like this is going to be helpful for so many different types of people. So I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with me. This was so fun.
This really was. I feel like we could just sit here and chat for even longer. So it was such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Oh, thank you so much.